DeadEye by Guy Wainick.
The fire had burned low by the time the stranger started talking. Most of the men around the camp thought he'd been asleep. He sat beyond the strongest glow of the flames, half swallowed by shadow beneath the brim of a weather-beaten hat. His coat was old frontier leather, cracked white at the seams from years of dust and heat. One gloved hand rested motionless on the table beside him. The other held a tin cup that trembled only slightly when he drank. Wind sighed through the sagebrush beyond camp. Somewhere far off, a coyote cried once and went silent. Nobody spoke until the stranger finally did. "If any of you ever find a revolver with an ivory grip," he said quietly, "you leave it where it lies." The conversation around the fire faded. His voice wasn't theatrical, no grin, no ghost story cadence, just exhaustion worn thin over something deeper. "It'll have an eye carved into the handle, real detailed, too detailed." He stared into the flames, like it's looking back at you. A small laugh broke out nervously. The stranger didn't react. "I don't care if you're dying of thirst, don't care if somebody's hunting you, don't care if that gun feels like salvation itself." He lifted his gloved hand slightly. "You walk away." The fire cracked loudly. One of the younger cowboys leaned forward. "How would you know?" For the first time, the stranger hesitated. Not because he didn't want to answer, because he'd answered before, many times, and it never seemed to matter. The old man slowly removed his hat and placed it beside him. His face was gaunt and pale beneath the firelight, with deep lines carved into the skin like old knife marks. His eyes looked wrong somehow, not mad, not wild, haunted. "I know," he said, "because I carried it." The desert wind died completely, and then he began. Back then, before anybody called him DeadEye, his name was Claude Mercer. Nobody remembered that name anymore. Maybe that was for the best. He hadn't started as a killer, hadn't dreamed of becoming one. Life simply cornered him slow enough that one bad choice started looking like survival. A debt here, a bad winter there, a man offering protection if Claude rode with the right people. That was how it always started. The gang he fell in with weren't legends, just hard men with hard eyes and quicker tempers, rustlers, robbers, drifters too mean or desperate to live honest. Claude never truly belonged among them. He wasn't fast with a pistol, wasn't cruel enough to enjoy what they did. But out on the frontier, weakness didn't excuse you from violence, it only delayed it. The end came outside a dry canyon north of Perdition Ridge. Claude remembered the morning clearly because the sky had been beautiful. Wide blue emptiness stretched over the desert while the gang rode laughing through the dust, half drunk from the night before. Then the deputies opened fire. No warning, no shouted surrender, just thunder exploding from the cliffs. The first rider lost half his face before he hit the ground. Another horse screamed and toppled sideways. Gun smoke swallowed the canyon. Men shouted over one another while bullets shattered stone into razor splinters. Claude remembered seeing one of the gang stumble backward with his throat open so wide it looked black inside. The ambush lasted less than 2 minutes. By the end, everyone was dead. Except Claude. He ran, not bravely, not heroically. He ran because terror hollowed him out and filled his body with ice. Behind him came the deputies' voices. "He's running! After him!" boots pounded rock, gunshots cracked through the desert. Claude fled into the wasteland blindly, lungs burning raw beneath the sun. Sand slid beneath his boots, heat rippled across the earth like something alive. Then he saw the mine, a jagged wound in the side of a hill, black, silent, waiting. He stumbled inside moments before another bullet struck stone near the entrance. The darkness swallowed him whole, and immediately something felt wrong. Not dangerous, worse, still. The sounds of the desert vanished behind him as though the world outside had ceased to exist. His breathing became strangely muffled. Even his footsteps seemed smaller inside that place. Claude moved deeper by instinct, one hand against damp stone walls. The air grew colder, then colder still. He found the skeleton almost by accident. It sat against the wall near the deepest chamber of the mine, upright like a man resting after long exhaustion. Dry leather still clung to its bones. Dust covered everything except one object resting beside it, a revolver. Even in darkness, the ivory grip gleamed faintly pale, and carved into the handle was an eye. Claude would spend the rest of his life trying to describe that carving. Nothing ever came close. It wasn't artistic, it wasn't decorative. It looked real, not merely shaped like an eye, watching like one. A folded piece of paper rested near the skeleton's hand. Claude picked it up first, though he already knew it wouldn't matter. He couldn't read. Another gunshot echoed faintly from the tunnel behind him. The deputies were coming. Claude looked back toward the revolver. Something about it felt aware, not live, interested. He reached for it. The moment his fingers wrapped around the ivory grip, a sharp sting sliced across his palm. Claude hissed. A thin cut opened beneath the glove line of his hand, fresh blood slipping instantly over the white handle. The eye seemed wetter somehow afterward. Then the deputies entered the chamber. 3 of them, tired, sweating, guns raised. "There he is!" Claude lifted the revolver. Later, he would try to explain what happened next. He never could. The gun did not feel heavy, it felt correct, like his hand had been built around it long before he touched it. The first shot fired before he consciously aimed. The first deputy nearest him collapsed instantly. The second shot struck another man directly through the eye. The third deputy barely managed to turn before half his skull vanished against the stone wall. 3 shots, 3 bodies. Perfect. Claude stared at the revolver in horror. Smoke curled from the barrel in lazy gray ribbons. His hand bled steadily down over the grip, and somewhere deep in the mine, he thought he heard breathing that wasn't his own. Word spread fast across the frontier. It always did. A gunman who never missed, a drifter who walked out of impossible fights untouched. Men started calling him DeadEye before Claude even understood what he'd become. At first, the revolver felt like a blessing. No more fear, no more helplessness. Duels ended before opponents cleared leather. Ambushes failed. Threats disappeared. Wherever DeadEye rode, people stepped aside, and the gun never missed, not once. But the wound in his palm never healed. That was the first sign. The cut remained thin as paper, yet every time he fired the revolver, it reopened deeper. Blood-soaked bandages, then gloves, then sleeves. Doctors couldn't explain it. Preachers refused to touch it. One old healer saw the wound and quietly asked Claude if he'd taken something from the earth that wanted paying back. Claude left before dawn. The revolver demanded things, attention, care, devotion. If he neglected cleaning it, the weapon grew strangely heavy in his hand. The trigger stiffened, the barrel clouded no matter how carefully he polished it. But when he sat alone, oiling the weapon beneath lamplight for hours at a time, it became smooth again, satisfied. Soon Claude found himself waking in the middle of the night just to check whether it remained clean. He stopped sleeping properly, stopped trusting silence, and slowly people began avoiding him, women especially. There had been one once, a widow in New Mexico with kind eyes and a laugh soft enough to remember Claude who he used to be. One night she reached for him while they lay together beside the fire. Claude jerked away suddenly, not from fear of her, from panic about the revolver. He crossed the room half-dressed and checked the weapon before he even realized what he was doing. When he turned back, the woman was staring at him like she'd seen a corpse sit upright. She left before morning. Others followed. The revolver tolerated no rival for his attention. Somewhere along the years, Claude stopped being a man carrying the gun. He became a thing carrying its hunger. The note stayed folded in his pocket for nearly 15 years, old, sweat-stained, unread, until finally, in a saloon outside Wichita, he handed it to a traveling preacher and asked him what it said. The preacher unfolded the paper carefully. As he read, his face changed, not confusion, recognition, fear. "What's it say?" Claude asked. The preacher looked at him for a long moment before answering. "This revolver is cursed. It will give you everything and take the same." The saloon had gone silent around them. The preacher swallowed hard and continued. "When it is done with you, it will not fire." Claude closed his eyes, because none of it surprised him. Not anymore. Deep down, he had always known. By then, there was only one thing left unfinished. His brother, Elias Mercer, sheriff, lawman, everything Claude should have been. For years, they avoided each other across towns and territories, like two ends of a snapped chain dragging through different lives. But fate, or perhaps the revolver itself, kept tightening the distance between them. Eventually, there was nowhere left to run. Claude heard Elias was waiting in the town of Black Hollow, so he rode there alone. The street stood empty beneath a pale evening sky when the brothers finally faced one another. No crowd gathered, no piano music drifted from saloon doors. Even the wind seemed afraid to move. Claude remembered thinking how tired Elias looked. Older, sad, not angry. That hurt worse than hatred would have. "You don't have to do this," Elias called quietly. Claude almost laughed. Didn't he? Hadn't he been doing this for years already? His hand rested on the revolver, and for the first time since the mine, it felt wrong, heavy, distant, like someone else's weapon. The brothers drew. Claude fired. Click. The sound echoed through the empty street like a coffin nail striking wood. No recoil, no thunder, only silence. And in that silence, Claude understood everything. The revolver had never belonged to him, not truly. It had simply used him until there was nothing worth taking. His blood, his name, his soul. Finished. The gun slipped from Claude's fingers and struck the dirt. Neither brother moved. Then, slowly, carefully, Elias stepped forward. He picked up the revolver. Claude saw his brother's expression change the instant his hand closed around the ivory grip. A tiny line opened across Elias's palm, a perfect cut. Fresh blood rolled slowly over the carved eye, and the eye looked alive in the dying sunlight. The old man beside the fire fell silent. Nobody around the camp moved. The flames cracked softly between them. One of the cowboys finally whispered, "What happened to your brother?" The stranger stared into the darkness beyond the camp. For a long time, he didn't answer. Then slowly, he pulled off his glove. The skin beneath was pale and split open across the center of his palm, a wound so old it should not have existed, yet fresh blood still seeped from it. "I told you already," he said quietly. His eyes lifted toward the darkness surrounding the camp, toward something unseen. "If you ever find that revolver—" The wind stirred again through the desert, and somewhere far off in the night, metal clicked. The old man's face drained of color. "It isn't waiting to be used," he whispered. "It's waiting to choose."